Hello and welcome to Simply inTAXicating. The GST Council, the most powerful federal body, met here in New Delhi last week at Bigyan Bhavan. Contrary to the views and expectations of the political pundits, the GST Council apparently surprised everybody. They had 5 agenda points by consensus, not by voting, which is a part of their mandate. By consensus, including part consensus, they decided on virtually all 5 agenda points. Some of those points happen to be major critical components of the proposed GST rollout. The decision number 1 was, of course, the exemption threshold, which has been decided 20 lakhs for the rest of the country, and of course 10 lakhs for 11 states, special provision states, the hilly states and the northeast. The composition scheme up to 50 lakhs they have decided. They have excluded manufacturers and service providers. But the most important was the cross empowerment, where it is known in the public domain now that major consensus has been realized, it has been achieved, and that was unexpected. In the very first meeting, the historic meeting of the GST Council, so many decisions have been taken, and part decisions have been taken which are going to be a part of the next GST Council meeting on this Friday in the national capital. And for instance, immediately after the first meeting, the draft rules, the invoices, the refund, the registration, all those rules have been made public. Of course, very little time was given to the stakeholders to give feedback. So trade industry will have some grievances to some extent, but more than that, some clarity has come out of them. That is something which needs to be welcome. So we have 3 distinguished experts who are going to talk about the way the GST Council is moving ahead, and we will also discuss the impact of GST on the emerging e-commerce sector, which occupies a major chunk of eyeballs and the mind space today in New India, the modern India. So we have Mr. Sumit Dutt Majumder, the former chairman, Central Board of Excise and Customs. We have Mr. Pratik Jain, the national leader, PwC, and our knowledge partner. And we have Mr. Ashish, Chandra, the Taxation Head for Snapdeal, who is going to tell us more about e-commerce related issues. So let me start with Pratik. Please give us an overview kind of thing. The GST Council. All of us knew that this is first meeting, so probably we never expected that so many decisions are going to be taken within 48 hours, in 2 days.
So it is quite encouraging to see. Frankly, I think this is the first time where really the industry is not being able to keep pace with the government, and government seems to be better prepared than industry. As you said, the most encouraging part of this meeting was that all the decision was with consensus, and on these 2 issues, on this threshold and dual control. There was some consensus which was obtained already, and with very minor hiccups, except for Kerala, I did not hear too much of noise coming out. So that's good, and they're also moving ahead very quickly. On 30th they're meeting to finalize the draft rules, and I think after that it will be put up in public domain, and industry will get at least a month to give feedback, because these are detailed rules and have to be looked at in detail. And after that, in October, they are talking about meeting on rate of tax, which is, I guess, the last contentious issue, which is remaining to be settled after the threshold and dual control. On the rate of tax, recently, Revenue Secretary said that we might be looking at multiple slabs. So till now, the understanding was that only 2 or 3 slabs, which is 18, 12, and maybe nil. Now there are multiple slabs which are being looked at. So one doesn't know how it will pan out. But all of that means that government is extremely serious about GST, and April 117 is going to happen. And one last point, constitutional amendment, they have made that amendment and they have locked themselves in by saying that within 1 year, if they are not able to implement GST, they will either lose the power for existing taxation, or they will have to go back to the parliament and get a constitutional amendment again. And obviously they won't want either. True. So as of now, it seems that GST is going to be certainty very soon, and we all need to start preparing for it.
Absolutely. So what is your take on this? The government willingly losing that, the freedom and locking itself. It's like that, I have no choice now. I am totally against the wall. So the GST has to be implemented. Of course, and that is something, sir, which I find going by the bonhomie at the GST Council meeting among most of the finance ministers, and they agreed quickly. For instance, in the first hour itself, they approved the conduct of business rule for the GST Council itself. They agreed upon all the procedures, etc. that goes to say that, government did it only because they wanted to give a very clear signal to the industry and trade that, look, we are very serious. Don't take us, casually, that government will not be able to do it from 1st April. Was it the reason, sir?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I must congratulate the GST Council in general and its chairman, our finance minister, for taking the initiative. And as Pratik has mentioned, you also stated that, there's so many important decisions taken in the first 2 days itself. And as for the preparation of the trade industry, it reminds me of that. I was just telling Pratik some time back that it's like that story of that wolf and the shepherd. So every time there's a wolf is coming, so nobody bothered that will never come. But now the wolf is coming, is at the doorstep.
It has struck rather.
So you have to be prepared. There's no other way out. And one thing, having been in the government, I can tell you, it was clear to everybody the GST has to come. I have been also writing in your column that it is inevitable. Right. The timing was an issue.
Right.
So that when we'll have the consensus. After all, it's not a simple thing to have consensus that all the 31 plus states will have to come in one page, and then center will have to come in one same page with the 31. So it took their time. Maybe 10 years was a bit too much long period, but still, it at least whatever has come, it is quite good. And the way decisions have been taken, and as we'll go to the other issues one by after, that particularly this threshold, yes, at least 20 lakhs, it has not gone back to 10 lakh. You see, all experts, you interviewed Mr. Sibren Norson last year, he also said, taxing the small business is cumbersome and it is not at all cost effective. Pratik was mentioning some time back that he got some figures. There's a % revenue is achieved from the small business. So it is not able cost effective, and it gives. I can say that it breeds corruption. So good that it has been kept at 20. I would have been happier if it was at 40, as recommended by Mr. Dr. Subramaniam. So this is one. Your other thing about the dual control, that I will deliberate on a bit in details later after you do the review. But I have certain issues on that.
But don't you think that this was a negative decision, lowering this exemption threshold for initial figure of 25 lakh? And even Arvind Subramaniam talked about 40 lakhs.
You see, all throughout you have been seeing that there has been a lot of compromises by our finance minister, and I call it necessary compromises. Otherwise, they were like, petroleum has been effectively kept out. It's a compromise.
No, but sir, here's the one point. I remember one study, sir, recently, of all the studies, the VAT, SSCs, etc. As per the study, about 65% of the total VAT SSCs, they contribute only about 2% of the revenue collection to the state government.
That's right.
So what is the fun of it?
Absolutely.
Why to keep such a large number? Because your cost of collection goes up.
And if I may use the word, it says, it just got only nuisance value.
So now what will happen? So I am saying this is a negative decision in terms of that they should have shown, a little more larger heart.
In the context that the things going on now, Mr. Jaitley also wants to get the things going.
Because otherwise also the cost.
But I know
the compliance cost is going to be very high. Sir.
I know, but on 5 lakhs, I don't think we should bother much. I think that
because today also for service tax there is a 10 lakh limit, and VAT differs from state to state. In some states only 4-5 lakhs. So in that sense, except for excise, which is of course too high, but service tax and VAT is lower than 20 lakhs. So in that sense, it's an improvement over the current system.
But sir, even your service tax SSC, sir, how much they contribute? Above 90% contributing, sir, only about 8%?
Here I'll tell you, that you have to give that service tax SSCs will be with the center, and the goods SSCs up to 1.5 with the states. I have some issue on that. First of all is that, how will you, because there will be, please correct me if I'm wrong, there are many entities where there is goods and services together. So then you will have to find a rule for that, which will be treated as a goods and go to state, and which will be treated as services. Again, a controversy there. Why create controversy by bringing this, making this division? In any case, the whole idea of ease of doing business for the small sector, so many suggestions have been given from different quarters that make the things very simple for the small business, but don't have this thing, have straight away dual control. From the very beginning, they have decided, if you see the first discussion paper from 2009 November, every time there's no talk about that the dual control will not be there. So other issues. Secondly, is the one decision I didn't see here, that what will happen to IGST, because there, they're silent. They're talking about SGST and CGST. Now, IGST, I am absolutely convinced that if you want to give the power of IGST to the states, you need another constitution amendment, because that clause is very clear that center will levy and collect IGST.
The 269A,
now, somebody,
It's a central act.
Yeah,
It's a central act.
No,
Exactly.
somebody pointed out to me after I wrote this article in your TIOL that said, sir, now also CST is levied by center but collected by states.
Right.
I said there is a difference.
There is a difference,
You see that language there, levied by center and assigned to the states.
Yes.
That assigned to the states, dictionary meaning is allocating the work of collecting to the states.
Right.
But this is not there in this present one.
Right.
So this will, IGST I have to take, and there is no statement on that. So I have to take it that IGST will remain with the center. That is there. Secondly, on the again on this distribution of work, because there are many other points which
Maybe,
also
sir,
touched.
I will ask, think maybe, there's this particular decision of the council to not to upset the status quo. The VAT assesses remain with the state authority.
It doesn't say VAT assess. It says up to 1.5 crore of turnover, it is states. Above 1.5 crore of turnover, it will be divided between center and state based on some risk parameters. So it's not as if all the VAT assesses will be with the state. It's only below 1.5. It was clarified.
It was clarified.
But for service tax assessees, they have said that center will do it till the time they train the states and there is a capacity building, etc., etc. After some time, which I think is fine, because I think states are not geared up as of now to assess services. Concepts like place of supply, rules, etc. is completely alien to them.
Right.
So they need to be trained. Now, whether it needs 1 year or 2 years, that's a matter of debate. But I think industry would be happy with that decision that service tax assessees will be assessed by center. So that's a good thing. We'll have to see how this risk-based parameter is worked out. Right. But from an industry point of view, of course, they'll be happy if they have to deal with only one authority. So I think I agree with his view that legislatively and conceptually they are supposed to do like this. But industry obviously is saying that for every issue to explain it to two set of authorities is a nightmare. So in that sense, I'm happy with the compromise.
Sorry for the one thing. The dual control question will come only when the transaction is not clean. Because if it's a clean transaction, the taxpayer and taxman, they don't meet. Like today, I'm paying my income tax. I don't even know who is my income tax officer. Same thing will happen in GST regime. We are forgetting this element. So it is only when there's a doubt that a doubt will be there, then a note. It is not the state away notice will be issued. There will be some chat through electronically only.
Some nodal officers, perhaps, both the sides.
What I'm trying to say is that I think it is only in 10% of cases where there will be effectively dual control. 90% of the cases, because if we see the history of the taxation, that from my experience I'm saying, generally only about 7 to 10% cases where there is dispute and allegation. No, the rest will be going straight away. They don't meet each other.
Right. So, but sir, now, I mean, this another point which you raised about this, the character of a particular, the organization or maybe the transaction, whether it is service or goods. In any case, today also it happens. I mean, most of the businesses, I am rendering certain services, I am also selling certain goods, trading goods perhaps.
Works contract is there, the goods are
works
there,
contract is one
there,
example of it, yes. So, it should not be creating too much of problem, sir. It just needs certain parameter, maybe tangible parameters.
What happens when the goods, this excise duty is lower and the service tax is higher, they want to, I mean, naturally the SSC would like to have it to be classified as goods. Whereas when it is the other way around, they would like to classify it as services. In certain cases, excise duty goes much higher later. So that issue is there sometimes.
But in GST,
and then sometimes, this is in the present day, there's issue with the VAT authorities also. They want to charge it as a goods, then this is the service. These issues are there.
Presently, of course, sir. I mean, e-commerce is a live example. I mean, they have been facing this issue. I mean, what has been your experience so far? The present scenario, and how do you think the GST will be able to, whether it's going to solve your problems completely or partly, or probably more needs to be done? So, what has been your experience, Mr. Chandra?
Yeah. So, I think first of all, I want to thank you for organizing this talk and giving it more of a e-commerce color. I'm not too sure how many people are really focusing on e-commerce, so thank you very much for this. I think post your telecom revolution, the only revolution which in my generation I'm seeing is the e-commerce revolution, which is also part of consumer internet. And most of the revolution, you have also seen that government has also participated with more flexible policies to give more boost and fillip to these revolutions, right? You may have seen the tax exemptions, other kind of benefit for software industry, then to telecom. But looks like the ball has dropped slightly for the e-commerce. I don't know why. But I mean, having said that, I think it's a significant step taken by the government in order to take very concrete step towards passing of the GST law and implementing, and giving a specific mention about e-commerce and aggregators in the law.
Yes, in the law.
This is important because in your current regime of VAT and CST, a lot of ambiguity. It all started with Karnataka, Bangalore, wherein they wanted to treat e-commerce marketplaces because we're not the sellers of the good. We basically provide a platform where millions of your sellers, small industries can list their goods to be sold to the buyers across India, right? So they thought that we are the agent and hence we have to be registered as a dealer and have to discharge the VAT liability. A lot of tussle happened with multiple states. So I think there were a lot of ambiguity in VAT laws. And I think with your GST, one is that we have the clarity that how the law impacts specifically on e-commerce. And e-commerce is a very key player in your startup, your campaign as well as Digital India.
Right.
But when you join this dot with what is coming out in the GST, I don't see much synchronization between these two plans. The real beneficiaries are the people who want to purchase the goods. We need to give more fillip and boost to your industry by offering more incentive, not disincentivizing them.
Maybe Pratik would like to crystallize, articulate.
So I think the basic problem that provision of TCS, which has been introduced, is a tax collection source, which basically say the marketplace model, if you are operating under, whatever vendors you are selling your goods and services there, when you make the payment to them, because they collect the payment typically from the customer, when you make the payment to the vendor, you deduct a certain portion as TCS, tax collected at source, and you give the remaining to the seller and then deposit this with the vendor. Now, along with that, there are associated compliances that they prescribe, that you have to file a statement of the TCS with the government, etc., etc. Now, it has led to a lot of issues, right? One issue for them could be that it's not clear what is the rate of TCS, whether it will differ from state to state, whether I have to take registration in each state to deduct your tax at source, and from a small vendor's perspective, they have to register on for GST without any limit of threshold. So that's what the fear is, that many of those smaller players may not want to get into this.
Absolutely.
And they say that rather than selling online, we will sell offline, and that will be not a happy situation for all of those things, Startup India and everything that you talk about, because it's unfair. It's unfair on the face of it.
How serious is this setback? The TCS
Well, I think
thing,
it is.
the number of, for instance, if you take a Snapdeal, for instance, it's a fairly large platform, and naturally it has reached each and every corner of the country, and good number of small players, sellers, etc. They must be coming to your platform. So if the government, you must have given a representation to the government also. You must have given that the kind of number, which is perhaps not manageable from your perspective. How big could be this number of?
Well, I would say that the problems could be of two types. Okay, one is cost of doing business, which is basically compliances, all stuff like that. We understand if, let's say, the nation wants to move into a particular direction, which is good for the overall economy. It's good. We all want to participate. We all support, and in order to support that, we have to incur some cost of doing compliances. So yes, I think the TCS, ideally should not be there, because that actually, distinguishes us from any other kind of a business vertical. But I think the devil lies in detail. It depends upon what would be the percentage of the tax collection, because most of the e-commerce sales, the seller have very minuscule kind of margin. For an Apple iPhone, maybe somebody, let's say, maybe earning, let's say, 100 rupees, right? Now, if you have, let's say, TCS of, let's say, 2%, 1%, he will not be able to get that margin. That will be blocked to the extent.
Less than 1%?
TCS, I think it should be some fraction. It should be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, or it could be a different TCS for, let's say, different categories of goods, because most which are, let's say, from our standpoint, maybe let's say those which are electronics or those which are off the shelf, the margins are very less. But let's say those goods which are bespoke good like fashion and maybe home furnishing and your furniture, the margins may be slightly higher. So I think ideally it should make, end of the day, tax also has to make a business and commercial sense. One is on the compliance, which is this one, and you have to file multiple returns, information sharing, upgrading infrastructure. The other is that you are putting a barrier, like what Pratik said, right? I mean, if I'm a trader, if I'm selling to people in my neighborhood in offline channel, there is no requirement of GST if my sale is, 20 lakhs. So why do I have to take the GST registration and participate in the ecosystem when I'm doing online sale? Well, is it going to...
One gets, the all India market, maybe
correct.
The global market.
So
that's the advantage you have on online
if you
platform.
ask me technically, if we do some deep dive, when you say interstate sales, right, in GST regime also, there is no, de minimis exemption, right? So on the e-commerce mode, if I'm a seller based in Gurgaon or say in Haryana, right, I would also be selling my goods to the people or the consumers who are in Delhi or maybe who are in Noida, right? So that becomes agnostic. Whether I am doing an offline sale or online sale, I still have to go for registration. This will impact the local sales of the sellers. Because he'll say, if I have to sell to the people in my community, in my state online, I have to get into this kind of jhamela. Right. So I don't really aspire to do interstate sale. So I don't want to do intrastate sale on e-commerce, and hence you are depriving him. A seller in Gurgaon would not be able to sell to a purchaser in Yamunanagar.
This kind of electronic initiative, maybe the e-refund will be very fast. Now the rules have been, the draft rules have been, sort of made available in public for feedback by the government. Maybe Pratik would like to give us...
So one thing is that TCS, what the government is saying is not a normal tax deduction at source. So to give them some credit, it is going to go to electronic cash register and not electronic credit register. So it will not be subject to those unjust enrichment or refund and all that. So it will be like an advanced tax deposit.
Receipt kind of thing, yes.
But the point is that if they are into that excess tax situation, they'll have to claim a refund.
Right.
It's a cash flow.
And the claim of refund will require an application and how...
little compliance oriented.
And then it's on the face of it's unfair because you have different rules for online and offline. And that's something. If they would have just said that you file a statement, which anyway they do in many states, to say that who are the vendors who are selling in your platform and what are the details, through that they can very well track the vendors. Why do we need to have this TCS provision? Yeah. Is something which I don't understand really.
Maybe sir, you would like to add something to this?
I've just, I think most of the things have been spoken by Ashish and Pratik. But in a general way, I would say not only e-commerce, the services sector. You see, the services sector, which includes e-commerce, constitute for 60 to 65% of our GDP. So you don't allow the hen who is laying golden eggs to be dead, if not flogged. So what I'm trying to say is that, so you must have, taxation is the policy of taxation, there's to be a balance between the need for development works, you need revenue, at the same time, you have the same time, as they explained, how this e-commerce is coming up, it serves the people, there's no denying the fact what he's been saying. So I think those considerations have to be kept in mind, and that brings me to the fact that service tax, there has to be more than one rate. There cannot be one rate. From 15%, it can't go to 18 or 20, whatever is the final rate. It will be tremendous impact on the service, and this is the sector which is giving you the GDP, contributing to the GDP. So keeping all these things in mind, very little time left, but I think those considerations have to be there, that taxation is the sole purpose, but while doing it, the other impact that could have, keep that in mind and see that these sectors don't suffer.
But sir, even for the government, it's a very tricky situation when to tax. For instance, e-commerce, it has come up. I mean, I'm going by various studies, it's going to double in next maybe 10 years.
So it's going double in 2 years.
In 2 years now, you see, sir, the way it is
I'm not
going.
saying that you're
Maybe
going
faster
back.
than that, yeah.
But faster than any other sector.
TCS perhaps was not needed. I'm not saying
Maybe
that
they could think of
They,
some alternative.
they are paying tax on whatever commission or whatever they're earning. They're any paid tax, service tax today also they'll continue to pay GST.
Right.
The question is that if on an e-commerce platform there are 200,000 vendors, to do this compliance of TCS with
That
each-
will be cumbersome.
I mean that involves a lot of paperwork.
And it will have an impact on the other thing. Ashish was saying that intrastate sales will come down, and look at the employment opportunity of the people also will come down in that particular state. So you have to think of the whole thing. I mean, by doing this, then again, these are called distortions. Then what will happen? I can have it here sitting in Gurgaon and somebody is in Ambala, he's getting it. Now the Ambala one will say that no, I'll rather go for interstate or I'll get for the local business.
Right.
So this situation will happen.
So I will just add one more thing over here. Let's assume that we are in the GST regime today, right? We all know that we have big e-commerce players who are in the industry or country for last decade or so. They will flourish, right? Because they have a good market. Let's say tomorrow, if let's say your son, who is a first generation entrepreneur, right? If he has to start e-commerce marketplace, do you think that he would be able to do a lot of investment in compliances, technology, stuff like that to really start a new e-commerce business? I would say yes, he can, but it would be extremely difficult, right? He needs to have, and in terms of barriers, the e-commerce service provider, their income up to 20 lakh is not exempt.
I'll tell you one thing. 1st April, we take it that 1st April 2017 GST is coming. Immediately after the election, there will be a review.
There will be a review.
I expect by 2019 end or 2020, there will be review, and all the difficulties which are facing, this will be sorted out there. I think that has to be there.
I get the point.
2020.
So before, sir, I wind up, let me go back to Pratik, and maybe Pratik could give us, because now those draft rules and forms are out, for the public to comment, or rather not comment. They have only 24 hours to comment. So the GST Council is going to take up, puts a stamp on the same, and they need to get notified. And GST in any case is going to work, on that. Maybe Pratik would like to, highlight a couple of salient features, the attractive features, which is good for the industry and
Yes. So GST, draft rules have been released for, as you said, invoice, payment, registration, return, and refund.
Refund, right.
So all the process document that they issued, there is a corresponding rule which has come. Quick ones, good for industry. Digital invoices allowed. Transporter doesn't need to carry an invoice if there is a GST reference number is generated on the system by the supplier.
Okay.
That would reduce paperwork. The physical intervention of the department is minimized. Even verification of the premises is not required before giving the registration certificate.
Right.
There are SLAs and timelines defined for everything. For example, provisional refund will be given to you within 7 days of receiving the application. So I think most of the interaction is happening electronically. I think where the industry would struggle is these multiple returns that they have to file. So if you see the total return number, return statement together, in various situations there are 27 of them. Okay, and that would require a very strong technology platform for anybody to comply with GST. And for that, we don't have enough time now before GST comes into play. So that I think they will struggle a bit to start with. There's a lot of information to be provided, including the state-specific profit and loss account, which has to be generated now as part of the return.
Right.
So I can only say all the best to the industry in terms of preparation. But there are a lot of positives coming out from this as well on invoicing and other things. So overall, I think industry is going to be happy. But it's just that how do they prepare for the volume of information that is required, and how do they gear up from an IT system and processes perspective? That will be the challenge in the next 6 months.
Absolutely. On this note, let me thank all my guests for making wonderful suggestions, and also the analysis, on the impact of the initiative and the decisions taken so far by the GST Council. And I fully agree with Pratik when he is talking about it will be a big challenge for the industry to gear up, to meet those electronic challenges and the targets. Fine-tuning the ERP, or maybe, after the definitions, etc., all those things are out, probably, redoing the whole exercise of, rebuilding the IT platform. A lot of these initiatives are going to be additional cost for the industry, of course. But in any case, it was already, presume and assumed by the industry right in the beginning that GST is going to be a new kind of tax system where the major emphasis will be on the compliance, and the compliance cost is going to be a significant component of doing business. It may contravene against the concept of ease of doing business, but it will remain there. So far as e-commerce is concerned, I rightly suggested that this is actually going to impact the small traders, the people who are doing some kind of making use of this IT platform being provided by this e-commerce marketplace model. Probably, of course, I mean, he is very happy that at least for the first time their existence is acknowledged by the GST legislation. Some of those terminologies like aggregators, etc., they have found a very proud place in the GST model law, the draft model law. But they will be little more happier if the government is little more sensitive to the complexities which they are going to go through in the coming days, and also align it with other pet projects of the Prime Minister like Startup India, Digital India, Stand Up India, etc., etc. So keeping that in mind, and the GST Council next meeting where they are going to take a few critical decisions coming Friday, and the GST rates in October 17, 18, 19. So certainly, we have a very tough time even for us to keep pace with the GST Council. So thanking you all for watching TIOL Tube. We'll keep you tuned to this.